Welcome back everyone to the channel. This is another book review, and this is my first book review of this author, which is actually pretty exciting news, honestly. I didn't know how I was going to feel about going into this book at all. I had pretty high expectations going into this book, and I'm not going to lie, it was great. So this is a book review of Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now, this book was actually really good. Spoilers ahead. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was a great book. The pacing of it was really good. The chapters, wow. I'm going to talk about the ending of it, the end of my actual thoughts of this book. I want to go through a little bit of like what this book is about. So the premise of this book is a circus. Now, I've never read a book that involves a circus except for one of the Wheel of Time books, and I was not proud of that one. So my expectations of circus or carnivals were not high, that's for sure. So the book starts off with two main characters and then a salesman go up to the two boys. The boys named Jim and Will. And I'm not gonna lie, I was instantly like, alright, this is already kind of weird. And the salesman's like telling them about lightning rods, taking them to their house, and telling the boys like, this house is gonna be the one that catches on fire if you don't put a lightning rod up there. So they put a lightning rod up there just in case it does catch on fire. What if it does? What if he was right? And my first thought is, I know the character named Mr. Dark, and I thought that's who Mr. Dark was, like right off the rip. I'm like, oh, okay, that's Mr. Dark. I was wrong. Then the book starts getting weird. And I mean, not like, oh, this is kind of weird. It was like supernatural weird quick. It took probably like 3 chapters maybe before things just started getting really weird in this book. And I really like the element where Ray Bradbury doesn't just slow it. He's like, yo, in your face with this. And I think that was just such a cool way to start off this. At first, you start with the creepy salesman talking to these boys about lightning rods. So that was cool. And then instantly it just gets paranormal, supernatural, weird. And I did enjoy that. So throughout this first part of the book, the boys are, just doing their own thing. He's doing a good job at every chapter. The boys are doing something. And he mentions things in the background that's slowly changing. And like the boys are noticing these small changes. There goes something in the wind. So in the first part of the book is when the circus arrives super late. Like a train shows up out of nowhere. And boom, the circus just shows up. And the boys go there. And then the next day they go there again. And it's packed. Everyone's there. It's just such a cool way of how he wrote this. It just basically just popped up and everyone's just like, yeah, this is fine. Especially because it's in the middle of October and usually carnivals and the circus is like summertime. So it was already just a weird thing to do. Later, the boys are going to leave the circus and they go to the merry-go-round. And it said out of order. Jim was like, oh, let's check it out anyways. And this guy named Mr. Cougar, I think his name's Cougar. Not Cougar, but Cougar. 2 O's, no U. Anyways, he like catches the kids and he's gonna like kick them out. And then you meet the villain, Mr. Dark. And at first I was like, that's kind of an edgy name, man. Like, is this really your last name? Please tell me, legally, is your last name Dark? Because that's kind of dope. Tells Mr. Cougar, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just let him go. So the kids are leaving. And Will's like leaving and he can't find Jim. And Jim climbs up a tree because he wants to see what's going on. And I was like, oh, so Jim's the one that's going to start things and it's going to get hectic. Sort of. I was sort of right, but I wasn't. Because they got on the tree and they were watching the merry-go-round start going in reverse and was playing music in reverse. And they watched Mr. Cougar on it. And all of a sudden, he became the age of like 13, the same age as the boys. And I was like, what? This is so weird. So early on in part 1, their teacher, Miss Foley, I think that's how you pronounce her name, she's there and she's looking for her nephew. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And then you find out that Mr. Cougar is her nephew from Wisconsin. And I was like, what in God's name is going on in this book? Through all that, you also get to meet Will's father, Charles, or you can call him Mr. Holloway, which is fine. Whatever. He went by both of them. And Charles, he does a pretty good job at actually sprinkling in Charles's life. Charles is 54 years old, and he has a son, Will, who is 14. And he's talking about how in this book, he's just talking about the age difference between him and his son. He's like, it's really hard for me to bond with my son because I was 40 when I first had him, and his wife was much younger. And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. I could see why that's a struggle, because you'd imagine that your son and you would have a really good relationship, but you kind of don't. And it's like really depressing, just saying. Part 2 gets interesting too. I just thought this book was really cool. And like in part 2, it definitely speeds up. A lot of wild things. So I'm going to really chunk it down quickly. So there's a part where there's a witch, mind you, on a balloon going to the boys' house. And she went there the first time and put like markings on there, and the boys went out there and just started spraying it with a hose. And one of their moms thought it was raining, so she closed her window, which is hilarious. Because I remember when I was a kid, and I was like spraying the house with the hose just for fun. And I could hear my grandma in the house saying like, "Oh, look, it's raining out," even though it's like sunny as day out and you see a rainbow and everything. It was just so funny that I was just thinking of that while that was happening. And the next night, the witch comes back in the hot air balloon, mind you. And I was just like, this is such a wacky book, and I love it. And what was going on in that is Will was like, all right, we're going to take this down. And he gets a bow and arrow and shoots the arrow at the balloon, and it pops the balloon, and the witch falls. And I was like, dang, dude, he just killed someone. That was my thought going through. I'm like, Will just murdered someone. And then throughout the second part of this is where it gets ramped up, where Will follows Jim, because Jim is actually going to the merry-go-round because he wants to get older. And through this whole conflict is Will fought his best friend to neglect him from doing it. And they go to Miss Folly's house, and Mr. Cougar comes down and has jewelry and starts calling for help. The boys get in trouble with the police. They run away, and then they go to the police station. Miss Folly is telling them, "Oh, I won't press charges." They appear, and then Will and his father have a pretty deep conversation, which I really enjoyed. And that conversation follows through towards the end, so it was actually a really meaningful conversation, I thought. While that was all going on, the next day, Will's dad's like, "All right, whatever you do, just don't do it." I guess this is the best way to do it. But you know what? Boys will be boys. And guess what? They go to the circus anyways. Yeah. And when they're on their way back, but they go to Miss Folly's house. But they see a little girl under a tree crying, and they actually figure out that's her. So they go to her house to double check. Clearly it's her. That's a little girl, because she was on the merry-go-round. And then they go back to the tree. She's gone. And then Mr. Dark is trying to find them. Throughout that, so Mr. Dark and the rest of the circus people, freaks, whatever you want to call them, are looking for him. And Will calls his dad. He's like, "Look, tell Mom and Jim's mom that we're working for the circus or something. We ain't coming home." And Charles is like, "Why?" And he's like, "I can't tell you, Dad." I was like, dang, this is pretty tough. His dad was like, "All right, son, I'll tell him you work at the circus." I'm like, wow, what a real one. Then that's when Charles was like, "I gotta figure out what's actually going on." So I was like, all right, good for you, Dad. And so Charles starts walking around, he finds the boys hiding, and he's like, he has a couple of chapters where he talks to Mr. Dark, and they're really good. Mr. Dark is like furious. He doesn't do anything to Charles, which I thought was really interesting. And the boys meet Charles at the library, and that's when they actually start talking about most of the things that Charles thinks is actually going on. I actually thought the idea of the title of this book is so interesting. It's from a Shakespeare quote, which I just thought it was so cool. I was like, oh, that's actually a really cool ploy. Huh? So that was a cool title. And then Mr. Dark shows up, and he takes the boys, and the witch shows up to kill Charles, and Charles doesn't die because he figures out how to defeat them. And I thought that was really cool. You get to part 3. And part 3 is actually pretty cool. I think it was a really cool moment of how he did it. Is the way to defeat everyone is happiness. The part where Jim is like half dead and half alive still. And Charles is telling Will, he's like, "We gotta jump, we gotta make it fun, we gotta have all these fun things." And Will's like, "How can I do that? My best friend's dead." He's like, "No, he's not." And it's actually a really good few chapters of this. To see the father and son bond and actually have a father-son moment, trying to bring back his friend, I just thought it was just such a great ending. So my thoughts are with this book, I think the book itself is really fun. A lot of pros for it. I didn't have any cons with it. Some of the text, some of the sentences were kind of weird of how he would write in here, Maybe he did that on purpose. Please let me know down below, because that was just odd, but it didn't take me out of the book, didn't distract me or anything. I just noticed it a couple times when I was reading, and I was like, okay. But all that, I really enjoyed it. I think the book was fast paced. I'm pretty sure part one was 25 chapters for the first 100 pages. So it was like every like 4 pages is like a chapter. And it was so much fun reading those. I prefer short chapters like that because it's just, you feel like you just breeze right through the book. And that's what I did. I read the book in a day. No, 2 days. Because the first day I read 100 pages, then I had to work. Next day I read 200 pages. Raka. But it was a really good book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought the book was phenomenal. I had no complaints about this book. Would I read it again? Yeah, I think I would. Maybe I'd do audiobook. But I wouldn't. I don't think I would reread it. I'll just do audiobook instead. Who knows? Would I recommend this to a friend? Absolutely. It's such a weird book, and that's what I like about it. The last 2 books I've read have been absolute bangers. And now I'm starting my next book I'm going to read. I hope it's also a banger because I like the streak of just reading weird, good books. If you guys made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out all my socials down below. And of course, make sure you guys stay safe, stay hungry, and tell someone you love them. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.